Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the modern market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make some or a lot of money on the internet. Loaded up for discussion today, we have Uniswap announcing Unichain, a new L2 designed specifically for DeFi. As if we don't have enough L2s. Cannot wait to get into a discussion there on the consequences of that with none other than Bread, who is with us today. Number two, Runes will have seen huge gains. Dog is up, Pups are up, a bunch of meme coins actually up as well. We'll touch on what's going on there. And also, Movement Labs introduces Open Network Testnet V2 after 350 million transactions and 8 million active addresses. We'll get into that in just a little bit. We've also got the latest on all price action and crypto and NFTs, and a discussion on the success rate of Polymarket bettors with some statistics that might surprise you. So stay tuned for that. Today, we've got Legendary and Bread in the co-host seats. We're ready to get into it in just a second. But before we do, just a reminder, friends, that nothing that we say here is financial advice because, unfortunately, this market is quite unpredictable. And so we would suggest that you proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Friday. It is the 11th of October. How are you doing?
GM Jim, doing quite well. Had quite a good laugh before the show when we spoke about LinkedIn and we spoke about Ryan Salame, the former CEO of FTX Digital Markets, posting on LinkedIn that he is happy to share that he's starting a new position as inmate at FCI Cumberland. And the comments under that post being absolutely hilarious. My favorite one was from LinkedIn to locked in.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Fantastic wordplay there. I didn't know that we would get that necessarily from the average LinkedIn participant. I thought
the comments under that post looked more like Reddit because people are really going for the wordplays. And also, very probably accurate comment was one. I think Ryan is going to prison for. Is set to go to prison for 7 or 7.5 years. People are commenting. Post already scheduled for in 7.5 years. What I learned for B2B sales, spending 7 years in prison.
I bet it's one of those examples where the real LinkedIn people, it weren't the people commenting. That would have got screenshotted, shared on Reddit and Twitter. People would have laughed and joked about it. And then those people would have gone on LinkedIn to make the proper humorous comments. Bread, you find something funny here. What do you think?
I was made aware of LinkedIn shit posters because this was shared, which is like an actual person doing stuff. And then my group chat shared another account, which is basically someone that's just posting kind of like Gort or kind of like just like a fake fiction, like a Weiwu account on LinkedIn, where like they're a manager and like, oh, I accidentally watched porn and my workers found me. And they called me out, and then I fired them immediately because they called me out, and they should get rid of like the prude mindset and like just like this ridiculous long post, just to, like kind of like clickbait LinkedIn. So
is it working? Like, can it be successful in LinkedIn?
I don't know. I just think it's hilarious because like just in that context of like fucking with everyone that's trying to be as like buttoned up as possible, and then just really leaning into it. I just enjoy that thought.
Yeah, that's pretty hilarious. I've always thought, wouldn't it be like every now and again, I go back on LinkedIn because I keep saying, even just from a business perspective, I do need to be back there more and like doing things more. And I went through a period of time where I was doing a little bit more there. I was like, I should probably do a bit more. And I see like people who I used to know. I was like, should I just comment in the same way that we would comment here? Like, what's holding me back? But you just can't do it. You can't do it there. They'll get upset.
I can do it. I totally could do it. I totally could do it. Yeah, of course. Like, yeah, I think it's almost funny. Like once you're like you've broken free of the shackles of like trying to be this uptight, like feigned image of everything else, and you get to go over there and fuck around and know that you don't like whatever you say there doesn't matter. Like I still have people that hit me up for my old job, and I'll just straight up reply to them however I want, knowing that I don't have to go back unless something is egregiously like in my favor. So I'll just like, yeah, like why are you talking to me? Like I'm respectful, obviously, but like just like talk to him like it's a buddy of mine because I don't need to feign that stuff anymore.
I like it. I like that perspective. Look, let's get into it. We've got a bunch of interesting stuff today. I'm delighted to say Legendary and Bread will be leading on a number of the headlines because they're really well placed to speak to some of this stuff. So let's get into it. Starting with the price action, as always, get you up to speed with everything that's been happening in the market in the last 24 hours, we have Bitcoin is just pretty much flat. Not a lot going on in the majors. Bitcoin's at 61K. ETH is almost up 1% at 2.4K. Solana is up almost 2% to $141. In terms of the headlines themselves, this is a big one. And I think Brett is super well placed to speak to this when we get into the discussion on it later. Uniswap announcing a Unichain, a new L2 designed for DeFi. What that means is it's Uniswap's DeFi focused L2 with Optimism's superchain within the OP superchain. What does that mean? It is joining a collective of L2s that share revenue and promise interoperability. Today, the superchain accounts for 44% of all L2 fees. What's the significance of that? Stick around. Brad will be breaking it down in just a little bit. Runes on the Bitcoin side have been really moving in the last 24 hours, kind of against the backdrop of a bunch of other things moving too. Dog in particular was up 20%. Pups is up 15%. Legendary, we'll do a little dive in there a little later. And then finally, also on the more technical side, on the infra side, Movement Labs introduces Open Network Testnet V2 after 350 million transactions and 8 million active addresses in version 1. So there seems to be some really positive data coming out of Movement Labs. The founder said, you guys nuked our testnet V1, 350 million transactions, 8 million active addresses, and over 55 apps live today. So they seem pretty bullish, pretty positive about the traction that they're receiving. Obviously, some of those metrics people are skeptical of sometimes, especially when people quote active addresses, when obviously people can spin up multiple addresses. But at a minimum, I think it's important to know what's going on with these infra positions. And so Brad will speak to that a little bit later as well. Some notable sales from around space. Ryan Koopmans and Alex Wexel sold Ascend for £44,100. I was at the Christie's auction yesterday. I was sitting next to Ryan as that auction was happening. That was very, very fun. It was great to see Ryan. Shout out to Ryan if he's listening with us today. He is a listener to the show quite routinely. Super happy for him. I think this was the first ordinal that was sold in a live kind of major auction house auction. So really, really happy for Ryan and Alice. Some other notable sales: Pudgy Penguin Gold sold for 29.5 ETH. CryptoPunk Cloudhair selling for 27.78 ETH. Those are the headlines and the price action. Legendary, let's head over to check out what is going on the NFT side.
Absolutely, let's do it. Bored Apes are basically flat, sitting at a 11.14 ETH floor, unchanged from yesterday. Pudgies are down another percent, 9.33 ETH floor for them. Azukis continue again to behave like a stable coin, unchanged from yesterday, 5.18 ETH floor. While Miladys are starting to correct down a bit. They had a fantastic week, up 14% over the last 7 days. However, down 2% over the last 24 hours and back at the 3.32 ETH floor. In terms of meme-like NFTs, there is definitely a winner of the day. It's the Mog Auras. Actually, 10 minutes before the show, they were up 14% over the last 24 hours. Now they're up 36% over the last 24 hours, sitting at a 0.25 ETH floor. And beautiful number to look at here, sharing this on the screen. Over the last 7 days, they're up 2,400%. Definitely feels like 2021 numbers in terms of NFT craze that we are talking about. And I think someone made the post on the timeline. It was Seneca, if I remember correctly, who said, imagine taking a break 3 weeks from the space, coming back, being excited about the news that NFTs are back. And then you see that all of the NFTs are pumping up, basically meme NFTs, and there's nothing from the old cycle that's moving up as aggressively as meme NFTs are currently.
Yes, that would be a strange experience coming back to the market after maybe two weeks off. Both memes running aggressively and just NFTs that realistically no one from the cycle previous would be very, very accustomed to. So I think that's a very fair point. Brett, aside from this NFT stuff, is there anything catching your attention in particular at the moment? We've got a couple of things that are catching our attention. Want to just throw it to you first?
No, you know where I live. I nerd fight. That is where my attention goes. Nothing tradable, nothing actionable, but we sit here and we bicker about which tech is cooler and where value will accrue. That's why you have the Unichain thing coming to me, because I've been in the trenches fighting the nerd fights right there.
I like it. I'm very happy about that. Maybe that's going to be the name of your segment, Brett. It's going to be called Nerd Fight, and we do a little little visual of you in some like boxing gloves or something, boxing someone who's arguing with you on Twitter. But yeah, we're going to dive into that Unichain stuff with you because I think it's super important. People want to understand why it's so significant that Uniswap are making that decision. We'll do that as we get into the headlines from about on the half hour onwards. Legendary, I wanted to bring up one thing, well, two things, and then maybe ask if there's anything you're looking at. The first is this tweet about Polymarket. I know you're looking at Polymarket all the time. Polymarket is clearly one of the breakthrough crypto apps in general. It's routinely being quoted and alluded to in mainstream media, and it's clearly gained notoriety. There's this interesting graph that's been shared, which reminded me of one about pump markets not so long ago, about how well people are doing on it. And if you're watching on screen, what you can see, or if you're not watching on screen, so what you can see is that there's this little chart showing who's winning, who's losing, and it's basically saying Polymarket and prediction market fans in general should be very concerned if the chart looked any different from this. Many shrimp, small losing players will always finance a few whales, large winning players in any form of gambling. Polymarket can only succeed if the vast majority of its users are fine with losing money on average, the same as they are with poker or sports betting. The number one unproven hypothesis behind prediction markets is that there are enough types of markets other than primary elections where this condition is true. So in this wallets by realized profit graph, it's showing that most Polymarket users are net negative and only 2K users have over 1K profit. Very, very interesting statistics. I remember when we shared a similar graph about pump markets and people were kind of up in arms, a little bit upset that so many people seem to be losing. And my response to that was, I don't know why people are upset, because in these aggressive trading games, whether it was NFTs, whether it was meme coins, whether it's maybe even Polymarket or sports gambling or whatever, you can kind of insert whatever term that you want into that gap. Most people lose. Most people lose. A small handful win. An even smaller handful are like exceptionally good at it and make the super gains. I feel like this is just one of those natural laws of the universe when it comes to these kind of high stakes gambling games. Legendary, you are the degen expert when it comes to risk management / gambling. What's your thought on this data?
I honestly, if you stay on the chart a bit, the distribution doesn't look too bad. Like you have 100K wallets who lost between $100 and $0, so basically didn't really lose anything. Then you have 30K people who lost between 500 and 1K, like another 20K people who lost more than that. And on the other side, you have also around like 22K winners. It's a way, way better distributions than we see with meme coins, actually. If you ignore it, because the majority isn't really losing money and like half are losing, half are winning. I do think at the end of the day, it's still a volume game, especially for the people who are like preparing for a potential token, for a potential airdrop. And if you look, for example, at this person, Time Question, who joined in August 2024, so basically joined 2 months ago, has already traded 149 million in volume, realized 200K in profit out of that, currently holding 680K in open positions, and traded across 1,278 markets. So basically across probably every single bet on Polymarket that has ever existed. But that's I think the volume that you will be looking at if you want to take this seriously in terms of preparing for an airdrop. And given the fact that so many people are in this basically $0 to $100 range, even though if they would get, in case there's going to be a token, right, that's still speculation, although we seem to have stronger rumors on that than we had maybe a month ago. Even if the people who lost like a little will get a small airdrop worth $50 worth, $100, that would probably offset most of their losses. If we looked at like this bar chart showing the 98K people who lost between $0 and $100. So I think at the end of the day, it's not too bad of an outcome. Obviously, people have to lose in order for them to make money, but it's not like a massively losing game like the statistics we've seen from Pump.fun, it definitely seems more balanced. And it makes sense because it's a binary bet, right? Is Trump winning, is Harris winning, whatever the bet is. There's not the 1000x outcome, and there is not a way to take on leverage and lose even more. It's a pretty binary thing.
Brett, did you want to come in?
I was going to say, I think the difference between this and something like a pump fund is, like, yes, you have to have people that are okay losing, but they come back either because they derived enough value from the experience, right? Like it was fun, enjoyable, whatever, or they feel like it was within their control and they have an edge going forward, right? Like in meme coins, that it becomes scary because it gets to a point where everyone kind of just says like, well, it's an insider's game. It's like there's nothing you can control. You're just kind of gambling, like literally just picking a number and hoping it wins out. Versus Polymarket, where you sit there and you may lose a bit of money, but you're going to go, well, I was dumb for picking this candidate because X, Y, and Z. The information was there. It's not like something that is just like true random. Like there are things that actually led to the outcome, and you can say, well, I have lessons learned, and I can bet on the thing in the future because the next thing I will have an advantage on because I have experience, I have a whatever, and I think it's a little more sustainable that way.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. That's very interesting. Interesting point from Overarch in the comments. I punt horses, and with any gambling to make a profitable annual income, you need a system with hedging, set staking size per bet, de-risking, etc. Less than 1% will have that in place on Polymarket. I do think maybe a lot of people just like to risk it all and go for stuff. However, I also take Oxy's point in the comments, which is I wonder if the people that are upset are Web 2 and don't realize the farming. And this huge number in the middle, I'm going to share this screen one more time before we move on. This huge number in the middle where like people aren't losing that much. I wonder whether that huge 98,000 cluster is just people taking on very small things or maybe hedging everything on either side of the bet in order to just farm the airdrop. And I think that's got to be the thing that people should bear in mind when everyone goes to Polymarket is just there's going to be an airdrop and people like there'll be significant money moving through the app with the sole intention to target the airdrop. So you've got to take some of the stuff with a pinch of salt. I don't know if anyone is speaking about that enough as soon as they go to any of these data points, but that's got to be like a big asterisk next to that fact. And just like this is a platform with an airdrop, it is coming. Significant volume will only be here for that reason. So
yeah, 100% agree on that. And also Kashmir in the YouTube comments is making a very good additional point saying meme coins were fun when you had to click 1,000 buttons to get the transactions through. The easier it gets, the more people lose money. And that's probably a very, very fair assessment. If it's like really one button click away to hyper gamble on a meme coin, it's probably easier to lose money there. Whereas with Polymarket, at least you have to have some sort of capabilities to get the money to Polygon, go that route. I mean, I know there's other ways to top up as well, but like the traditional Web3 native route would be to bridge over to Polygon and deposit USDC there. So there's definitely a bit more of a barrier than with some of the meme coins now, and definitely more than we had with meme coins in previous cycles.
Okay, yeah, I think that's fair. I've got one more thing that caught my attention. I want to be able to share it as well. I don't have the link with me at the moment. I think this is pretty interesting. I kind of wonder whether I don't know how interesting this is, but I had a very good conversation with AV yesterday, and I started to get on board with the idea of why some of this type of stuff might be cool. So, just news just before the show, didn't make the snapshot, but Binance just announced that they're launching their own pre-market. So I'm showing it on the screen for people who are watching in. Binance pre-market is live. You can buy and sell launch pool tokens before they are listed. So I think that's pretty interesting. And I've been thinking a little bit about pre-market tokens, OTC style tokens, like what traditionally so far, at least everything that we've done when we report, we always say like, oh, so this token's trading at this price, but we can't trust it because you can never trust pre-market data, blah, 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 blah. But I had this interesting thesis shared with me yesterday, which is a lot of locked tokens will become more valuable moving forward as people get more impatient moving forward, because this cycle keeps getting later and later And as that kind of speculative capital runs out of new funding opportunities, and this is an interesting thing I haven't really thought about for this cycle. There's going to be fewer teams looking to raise from scratch at this point, right? Think of all the big protocols. They've either already raised, they've done their pre-seed, they've done their seed. They're like getting into full throttle. It's more about a case of when is the TGE rather than we need to close our raise. Sure, there might be a few people who are still looking to raise. That very well might be the case. But in terms of what the headline ones that are kind of on the horizon, the headline ones for this cycle are kind of, they're sorted. Monad, Movement Labs, Mega Eat, like there's certain things, Berachain. The narrative has been set. I don't know that there'll be more that come in there. So where does all that capital go when people don't necessarily want to fund the next cycle's big opportunity? Well, what they might do is they'll go to the people selling Berachain OTC to say, or it's even something that's already live. Say something's already live. They've got a vesting schedule of another year to go. We'll sell it to you at 40% discount to the price, or maybe 50%, 60% discount to the price. And you just take that over and you vest over the next period of time because you'd much rather have the cash. And remember, you're already up because your price that you got in at as a seller was much lower because you were in the pre-seed or the seed. So you're happy because you get your profit. Someone else gets to profit from the next period of time, assuming that the token doesn't dump completely. And then the other interesting secondary consequence of that is it raises the cost basis of that asset. Remember, the one reason why all these tokens become uninvestable on the public market is because everyone in their head is thinking that these tokens have been bought so low by all these early investors, therefore everyone needs to sell. Whereas if they've been sold OTC to someone, it raises the cost basis, less likely to sell at a higher price because their entry price is that OTC price rather than the seed or pre-seed price. So I thought that was a very interesting conversation. And I wanted to share that to get your guys' thoughts. Maybe Bread first. Oh, yeah, Bread first, and then Legendary. Want to hear from both of you on this one.
Yeah, I think it's a good thought, and generally, like you said, it would be bullish. The things that are long term. I was trying to go through my head of like, what is the full list of things that we've been anticipating for multiple months now at this point? And you're right. I think like all of them are known. I can't think of anything that's like even in that transition phase. It's all like you said. It's Mega ETH, a few other L2s movement, whatever. There's Berachain. There's no eigenlayer out there. There's no like I don't know. So it may lead to some shock and awe for these tokens specifically whenever they do get to the point of launching because they have been, as you said, the floor has been lifted up to and through actual TGE, which would then maybe think like kick off a little bit of what the bull run is because like, oh my God, now these things are actually like it's a bullish unlock, bullish TGE number mints and then goes up beyond that, which would be obviously good for all of us. But yeah, it's an interesting concept.
Legendary, what do you think? Do you think there's chance for like maybe finally some better either pre-market action, and this is maybe why Binance is launching this, or OTC action? Can you see how that might play out, or what are you thinking about this?
On the reason why Binance is launching that, I think it's pretty simple. If you look at the business model and you're an exchange, you make money on volume, you make money on people trading your token. And as an exchange, typically the token can only be traded after the TGE. So you miss out on the period before the TGE. And there's obviously OTC trading going on. There's people who want to trade. There's people who do private deals or trade on other pre-markets. And Binance is like, fuck it, why not get a share of that business as well? Why not trade a token before the token's even live? And let us have that volume. I think what it can lead to is definitely by Binance doing it, getting more volume. And if there's more volume in there, it's probably a bit more difficult to manipulate it. I think we've seen it with some of the, I would almost go as far and call them nefarious TGEs, where even the teams or insiders pumped up the prices on singular trades, 2-3 trades on whale market to insinuate that, oh, this is going to launch at 100 mil FTV and everyone's up like 50x on their investment. And I would probably assume that by the nature of tokens that Binance would list and would probably list on the pre-markets, that they would get more volume, that they are more high interest tokens as well, and that the pre-markets might become more accurate. That's one aspect. The other aspect that's certainly interesting is the one that you also brought up, B, by talking to the OTC deals, the selling of still vesting tokens, which is a very intransparent market. We
Yes.
talked about Seneca, who shared a DM that he got. I don't think he mentioned the project that offered him an OTC deal. I have said on the show before, I know of a Telegram group that is sharing basically a bigger spreadsheet with lots of tokens, OTC people who want to get rid of. There's someone basically running his own little OTC marketplace and taking a commission for doing that. And it's completely intransparent, right? We already have a bit of a hurdle to figure out vesting schedules. And if you look at token unlock pages who are covering them, they are very helpful. But still, you do not know the nature of every deal. You do not know the nature of staking rewards and how they are vesting or not vesting. And that adds a lot of complexity. That's not even covering the OTC markets. And I feel like if OTC markets will be traded a bit more systematically, that would probably help to lift that veil a bit and show a bit more of what's going on with the actual tokenomics and token tradings.
Exactly that. That was one of my
Who's
key.
Binance's competition for the next everything app? Like, is there anything as all encompassing as Binance as a like an entity within our space? Coinbase, maybe.
I mean,
Coinbase, I'd argue Coinbase, yeah. I'd argue Coinbase also because building Base, they can be pretty modular about adding features and seeing what gets traction and add that more to the like classical Coinbase roster. But Binance is pretty fast. I remember that Binance also launched a questing platform when all of the social farming campaigns were a big thing and they wanted to get a piece of that. They're like really good at catching these trends fast and rolling out stuff within a couple of months.
Very, very interesting. Okay, that's something. The thing I was about to say, I completely agree that it's very, very opaque. And the more I started to think about it, the more I started to think this is going to be a really hard market to read. If you're being told one thing on the timeline, like, oh, VCs are bad because they keep dumping on you and because you think they keep dumping you on the public market. But if the OTC stuff's ramping up so significantly that all of this stuff is just being done behind the scenes anyway, it's just it's hard to know what people's cost basis is, right? Because that's one of the key things you want to figure out. You want to figure out how at what price are these people in at, and if you're just assuming it's all the same people who got in at like 0.0001 cent, like on Celestia, but actually all those tokens have been sold multiple times onwards by now, like you're dealing with very, very imperfect information. So that's one of my key takeaways, something to think about as we move through the rest of the cycle and we move much closer towards a number of other TGs. But look, I think we'll leave that part of the discussion section there because we really want to get into the headlines today. We've got some very, very interesting stuff to discuss. First and foremost, Brad, we're going to go straight to the Uniswap news. They've obviously announced Uni Chain, is it? So I'm going to throw it straight to you to break down what this means as an L2 and for the rest of L2s and Ethereum.
Yeah, so Unichain is a L2 launched by Uniswap or Uniswap Labs, more specifically, that is going to exist within the OP superchain. What that means is like Optimism launched a chain and it made its code open source and said if you fork our code and commit a certain amount of your revenue to us, you can be a part of the super chain. Then all of these chains keep their code in line with each other, so they're interoperable and they have like an ecosystem that they're forming, right? So all the OP chains are interoperable. Arbitrum has a similar with the Orbits. You have ZK Sync, which has the ZK Stack. Like so, there's like you have these pockets of interoperable L2s coming together. Uniswap opted to do Optimisms as their code base and then did some changes on top of it. So why everyone is freaking out or discussing it heavily is because one, they're doing some innovative stuff with regards to how the transactions are actually going to be processed on the chain. One, they're faster because they use some stuff called pre-confirmations. No, it just means that you get your accepted faster than traditionally. And because they have some mechanisms for returning some of the MEV that would typically be captured by the chain back to users, back to token holders, gives them a little more control. So it's technically interesting, but the biggest thing is just that Ethereum now has another very large application on its ecosystem going to launch its own chain. And if you followed any of the stuff that I've talked about recently, you know that these L2 and L1 relationships are pretty lopsided in favor of L2s, at least economically, right? So like the big trade-off that's happening here is Ethereum as an asset no longer has the fees coming to it directly because users are now going to transact on a second chain. But the bet is the moneyness of Ethereum, because it'll be denominated, the assets on that chain will be denominated in Ethereum. People will transact in Ethereum. So the trade-off that they're getting is the direct quantifiable fees that would have transpired on L1 are now taking place on L2. Is that good for Ethereum, the asset, right? That's the big debate. Like all of these apps that roll off into their own chains in this app chain modular ecosystem future, what does that mean for value accrual? Does it accrue with L2? Does it accrue with L1? And what proportions? And that's the big debate we've been having on the timeline the last few days.
That's such an awesome way to set the conversation up. A couple of follow-up questions from me. So you set up what the debate is. It seems like you've come down on the side of, look, I think this is bearish, at least in the short to medium term. You had David Hoffman from Bankless reply to you, say Ethereum will produce 10,000 app chains and people will somehow think it's bearish, calling you out here, Brad. But your response was, I don't know how quickly you managed to do this drawing. Fantastic response, fantastically artistic response. You said 10K L2s likely come and probably works out well for ETH, but it's going to be a ride. And for people who are just listening in, I guess the suggestion is, look, we're on this kind of long uphill road for ETH, which is potentially a very good asset. But in order to get there, it's not going to be a straight, smooth journey. Maybe, Brad, you can speak to some of the things which you think are like the speed bumps or the potholes. I don't know which way the bump is going. In the diagram, it's going down. So the craters.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like that's basically all the debates, the nerd stuff that I talk about on the timeline, right? So he says, don't like, we're gonna have 10,000 L2s, like it's all good for ETH, which like, yes, but like now think about how long it's going to take to get to that future that he's envisioning, which I do agree is probably good, but it's going to be fraught with discussions and debates and arguments and whatever. And the few that I highlighted here is like one, just straight up the timeline, right? Like that's a 5-year journey minimum, right? Okay, that's crazy. That like 5 years in crypto is basically a lifetime. Then you have like the last few months, we've had single bit digit GUI and people are freaking out because that's how we quantified usage and value and whatever. And then like, well, if you look at just the raw like fees to Ethereum burn that is required, like the top L2s are given 5% of their fees back to Ethereum by way of burn. So like if you're looking at that, okay, you need $1 billion. I did a trillion there, but you need $1 billion of economic activity fees taking place on the L2s for that to translate down to like $30 million in burn on Ethereum, which is not a lot. That was peak before Denkun back in March. So like 5 years, we generated enough fees to generate enough fees at the L2 such that a very small amount trickles down to Ethereum, such that we are burning the same amount that we did 7 months ago. Like is that really bullish? Like Van Eck is quantifying this stuff just with a discounted cash flow model. Like you need some of that stuff. So it ultimately gets there. People are just going to keep tacking shit onto Ethereum because that's kind of like the mindset everyone has. It's big. It's got network effects. All that stuff is going to continue to happen, but it's going to take time and it's going to be a journey. And it's not like a guaranteed answer.
Really helpful. Great summary, explanation, further thought process there, Brad. Thank you for that. Legendary, do you have any thoughts on this in kind of Ethereum's trajectory?
Yeah, I think Brett explained that fantastically, and there seems to be this discrepancy when we're looking at the growth of economic activity, the capital inflow on the one hand, and on the other hand, on the growth on the application sides and the speed at which those applications want to basically break out and have their own L2, have their own roll up to integrate a bit more of the economic activity into their own ecosystem. And that discrepancy is exactly what leads to that beautiful illustration where people in the comments also have been saying Brett is a professional illustrator because of that, where the road is just not going straight ahead, but there's going to be a couple road bumps. And let's hope that we to speak in the analogy of that illustration, that we don't drown in the water, but make it to the other side.
Okay. Look, I think that's really helpful for people just to get a sense of what's going on. Maybe just the final thing, Brad, on like user experience for Uniswap, because people might get lost in the depths of the transactions. Like user experience for Uniswap, does that change at all here? Does that really, maybe it gets a bit faster? What's the kind of net effect
Yeah.
for users?
So TBD on everything. So like obviously the everything on the L1 will persist, right? You can continue to do that stuff. They're not going to undeploy the contracts. They literally can't do that, especially now because the destroy thing's gone. So like those will maintain there, and you can probably still do that for the rest of time. They're going to deploy a chain. You're still going to have to bridge assets into this chain, and that's actually in my thread. I mentioned like I had wished that Uniswap would opt for a based app chain, which, not to dig too deep into that, which would be a app chain that would leverage Ethereum as its sequencer and therefore could be interoperable with L1 and all of the liquidity that's there and everything. So like you don't have to actually take those funds and try to take them over to their dedicated chain. They would still just interact with it. So it'll be an experience like anything else. You'll have to bridge into a chain. You'll have to interact with stuff over there. Over there, you will have an advanced trading interface. It'll be faster. It'll be cheaper, but only in those liquidity pools that exist on that chain, right? Because they are separate blockchains. It will be totally separate. You may get some of that abstracted away, which like that's another thing. There's a layer above all of this shit that's just a chain abstraction layer where you interact with one thing and it works on all your accounts across all your chains. That might happen, but again, that's a multi-year process for that to like actually be refined to the point where Uniswap is launched. These other things have integrated. You've set up an account there. Those things are being working. Like it takes time, but that'll be the user experience roughly.
I love it. I think getting into some of the technicalities is really, really helpful. I wonder whether for the majority of casual users, their response might be something like this from eBrink in the comments, which is the more complex ETH gets, I feel like people will just go to Sol. However, to be fair, there are various like other things happening on Sol, which is increasing the complexity. I think Fire Dancer is part of it. There's even L2s on Sol. People might not know that that's happening, but those are getting built out. It's just they don't need to have, they're not at the stage where they need to have this debate and these battles yet. So
it's coming for all chains. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, the complexity of Solana is there. Like, look at the discussions of, is Solana centralized? Is it decentralized? And you have Mert discussing that back and forth with devs, and it gets extremely complex. And I tried to follow some of the discussions, and at one point I'm like, I'm out. I just don't have the knowledge to follow your yes or no type of question whether Solana is sufficiently decentralized or not, because it goes into the technical complexities. It's just the thing that, do we want to deal with them, or is it something we choose to ignore? And I feel like with ETH, we are currently in this phase we are not choosing to ignore it, because it's already a popular take to dump on ETH, and it's a welcome invitation to use the layer 2 landscape to dunk on that as well. Because I feel like whenever a new L2 spins up, it's always like the immediate reaction to say, oh, another L2, as if we needed that. So it's already that, negatively framed mindset on it, because we're in this dunk on ETH mode. And with Solana, we are a bit more benevolent, because we have the meme super cycle happening and unfolding there, so that we maybe look at way of some of the other things that are happening or not happening.
That was actually a response that I had with a lot of my people are getting mad at me because I'm fudding ETH or whatever. And I was like, guys, look, this is all, no one knows the answer to this stuff. And if Larry Fink comes in and he heavy bids ETH, like all of this goes away. And we're all talking about how redacted we were for arguing about Uniswap leaving, because it does not matter. Tens of trillions of dollars is now bidding the singular asset because it's a smart contract platform. And that's just where all the infrastructure is built. So like, take it six in one hand, half a dozen in the other, I think is the saying. We're like, you don't know, man.
Like it. If you like it, just bid it. That's how you show you like it. Look, I thought it was a great discussion on ETH and the kind of app chain idea. Let's keep it a little bit technical, because we're going to go a little bit less technical later towards the end of the show. I think Movement Labs is not something that we've spoken about too much when we were speaking about different teams and protocols that are kind of being crowned or being spoken about as this cycle's leaders, the ones to be excited about. Movement Labs is definitely one of them. They just announced that their testnet in V1 had 350 million transactions, 8 million active addresses, and over 55 apps. went live. They've raised a significant amount of money. They are definitely being spoken about in the highest regard as it relates to like who people are looking forward to see launched this cycle. Brad, maybe you can speak to Movement Labs a little bit. I know you're very interested and invested in this space.
Yeah, so this one's pretty simple. I talked about those clusters of L2s that exist. There's another like grouping of L2s. They're not interconnected in any way, but I just classify them as the high throughput L2s. Now, I had a thread the other day where I was calling them out, like asking for them. And these are a lot of L2s that have the mindset that we are now bringing our specific L2 in the tech to the L2 landscape and doing it with such high throughput, such capacity that we don't really give a shit about interoperating with a bunch of other L2s. Like Optimism has 35 L2s because they all want to sit there and work together because none of them are really high throughput. They're mostly just like small little boxes. Whereas Movement, which is based on Move, which is the language that was used for like SUI and Aptos, right? It's the thing that came out of Libra and Facebook. It's a smart contract language that's built specifically for blockchain, right? Ethereum built its smart contract language as a general purpose thing. It didn't actually know what it would be used for, so it's not perfect. Movement was built specifically for blockchain use cases after they were known, so it was beneficial that way. Anyways, Movement is one of these high throughput chains. They're basically juicing it, and they want to see how fast they can go and how like performant they can be, and they're doing these incentivized test nets to kind of poke the edges of their setup, right? So you launch it on testnet, you incentivize people to use it, you want to do like load testing, you want to see like throughput. They're mentioning finality here, so they're just incentivizing users to get on testnet and to basically push the gas pedal as hard as they possibly can to see where the cracks form so that they can fix it before it's mainnet. Now, you mentioned it earlier, a lot of this stuff, like, yeah, they're not individual users, obviously. All this money is free. So there's no economic like penalty to actually just doing a bunch of crazy weird shit. So and people don't know, with testnets, you literally just go to a website. Typically you can hit a faucet. The faucet will just give you testnet tokens to then operate on. That's probably what they did. They just got a shit ton of tokens. They distributed into a bunch of people and said, let's just goose everything and see like how fast we can go to kind of have some impressive metrics. And that's what's happening. So they're doing V1, they have V2 coming. They're gonna kind of go back in and shore it up a little bit, launch it again. You probably get a little bit of airdrops come Movement launch, because that's usually what they do. Same thing's going on with Barachain right now. They have a Barachain launch. You can go and fuck around on testnet, and when you do that, you can buy mainnet tokens. But yeah, that's what's going on. They're poking the edges.
I love it. Again, great summary on the kind of the building blocks and the foundational things we need to know about Move and Movement. Maybe just follow-up question on your just general take on it then. Like, this is clearly very different than, this is not in the same bucket when we're talking about there being another L2, another chain, part of this, the super chain that Optimism has created. This is very distinct to that. So I think it's important to make that distinction for people who are less familiar. What's your take on this kind of, this thing that's obviously set aside from what's become the norm in the EVM landscape?
Yeah, so I find things that I find L2s that have tried to make themselves meaningfully different appealing to me. So Mega ETH is meaningfully different with its throughput. Alt VMs, which is what Movement is. The same thing with like Fuel. They're not just a copy pasta L2 that's just kind of there with a new logo slapped on it. They actually have some underlying things that make it technically different and potentially interesting. And Movement itself is seen as maybe the language of the future for blockchain. I'm seeing a lot of technical conversations say like this is because it was designed specifically for it, and because it came from, again, people that came out of the Facebook realm. So like they're very educated developers. That there's a lot of potential that this thing may actually become the dominant programming language on a long-term time horizon, maybe even more than the EVM, which is what Ethereum is built on. So, I want to get exposure to it. I want to get familiar with it. And I would say, yes, it's meaningfully different enough that it's on my radar.
Love it. Okay. That's really, really interesting to me. I don't think I knew all of those details. And I think those distinctions actually, I like the way that you phrase that, meaningfully different, because I think what people have experienced and the reason people have an issue with so many different things launching all the time is that they are indistinguishable from each other. So that is cool, and it's good to understand that difference. Did you want to say one final thing?
Yeah, just say that, like that's mostly the point. And just to give like some context, of the 60 launched L2s and another 85 that are queued to be launched in the next, X amount of months, like there's only 3 that are like lined up to be a move based L2. So like it's a subset of a subset of a subset, which is like, okay, it's unique and there's not a lot like it. So if you're going to want to get exposure to something like this, you don't have many options. And this is the one that's at least front of mind, which is always important, right? If something has a narrative or is on the timeline, it means it's probably going to continue to do that and continue to grow over time, just like Barricade, just like Monad, just like whatever. So it's good to take tabs of that.
I like it. Great numbers to back it up. Legendary, final take here, or should we keep it moving?
I don't have anything to add to that. If Brett thinks it's meaningful, then I want to keep it on my radar. But I know that Funky has his hand up, so I want to go to him for a quick take on it.
Yes, please.
Hey, GM guys. Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to just the conversation with Movement. Obviously, we work with the team closely because we're going to be running their infra. And we do know them really well. And one thing I would not discount either is just like all these others that are coming that have a lot of hype, whether it's Monad or Barachain, Movement has an insane cult. If you look in their Discord, I'm in there all the time, mostly as a lurker, just trying to keep up to date with for work reasons. Really, really just top-notch team. I saw Rushi yesterday. He did he was on the modular panel at Permissionless, gave him a little fist bump. Brad, you'd appreciate his parents bitched him out about his BMI because he's lifting so much and getting jacked. But really, just I think founders play an important role when it comes to how important and chains are perceived to be. And Rushi is absolutely knocking out of the park. Cooper, his co-founder, is a little more quiet, but they very much have a very strong cult following, very strong community. And I think Movement is going to do a lot of interesting things.
Like it. Good additional information, specifically lifting information. Very important. Brad.
Reinforcing that with him real quick, I did actually see a post from David Phelps, who's the creator of Joker Ace, which is an on-chain voting like game show thing. And he put out a petition to try to get a bunch of L2s to activate their community to vote for like any given L2s. And he did say that like I think the Movement ecosystem spent something like 30 or 40 grand on like voting for their specific stuff to like beat out a second L2 that I actually can't even remember what it was. But just reinforcing what was said there.
Interesting. Definitely something to keep an eye on. Very glad that we could have that conversation here today. Look, we've got 8 minutes left for today's show. We've got one headline to get to. But before we do that, let's just hit the Web3 Roundup to get you up to speed with everything else that's happened in space in the last 24 hours. Number one, this was kind of a big one. SEC sues crypto market maker Cumberland for $2 billion. The SEC charged crypto market maker Cumberland with acting as an unregistered dealer for more than $2 billion in crypto assets. The SEC said that Cumberland acted as an unregistered dealer since March 2018. I feel like these things come through now and people just sigh and then move on. I don't know how concerned people are. That is what's happening. This is a cool one. Argentina Football Association to start tokenizing players' training rights, allowing fans to benefit from trade. So the idea is to offer clubs the ability to tokenize the training rights of players that they've created, and anyone can acquire a football's token from $1, which can potentially create a new source of income for sports clubs and fans who want to bet on their favorite players or simply the players that they think might become stars. Pretty interesting stuff, especially doing it on chain. Fidelity prepares money market fund to trade on blockchain to catch up with BlackRock. That's back to more the financial side of things. Tokyo-listed firm Metaplanet continues to buy Bitcoin. They bought another $6.5 million worth, and so their holdings are up to 748 Bitcoin, unless that full stop is meant to be a comma. Sometimes in different countries, they don't do the same. So that would be a very big difference. Need to check that. Very cool story on the art side. Xcopy Black Hole Lost Edition discovered yesterday, but no NFT was returned in exchange for cash. A funny story where people like located this link that actually went to this edition where it was possible to send money for an Xcopy edition. But it turns out that it was dead and it took the money but did not return an NFT, unfortunately. 10KTF sold by Yuga Labs to Possible. The new company is called Kagami, kind of in line with Yuga Labs strategy. Seems recently we're just like trimming some of the fat, getting rid of some of the things that they're not wanting to concentrate on. And then finally, very entertaining one, Tron founder Justin Sun elected Prime Minister of Micronation, Liberland. Just what does Justin Sun not do? What positions can he not hold? I cannot wait to be around for the next 10, 20 years in this space to continue to report on Justin Sun. Amazing. That's the Web3 roundup to get you up to with everything else in the space. We have 5 minutes left. Legendary, I don't know if you wanted to desperately touch on Liberland there before you hit the final headline. Feel free to do so if you want.
How did you know that? Liberland is a very particular one. I have a thing for microstates and stories behind. Liberland is.
What does it mean to have a thing for microstates?
They have.
You were talking about them before the show as well.
Yeah, I know. They have the most interesting stories to tell. So Liberland is a little territory in Croatia, and Croatia is saying that's not our territory. It's not part of Croatia. It's part of Serbia. And Serbia is saying, nah, it's not part of Serbia. We don't care about that. We don't want to govern them. And they are not a recognized state by the other states. But they themselves said, yeah, okay, if Croatia doesn't want to have us, Serbia doesn't want to have us, we're just going to be Liberland and pretend to be our own state. You cannot visit as a tourist. It's on the Danube, and there's like police patrolling all the time. There's lots of YouTubers who are going there and try to visit the local people and manage it. But yeah, they do make for quite good content, and it's a pretty funny story that something like that can happen. That you have a territory in a country, and the country is saying, nope, it's not part of our country, it's part of the other country, and the other country is saying, nope, that's also not the case, and then it's in a bit of a limbo.
Very, very funny. Very entertaining. Anyway, you want to get into the final headline for the day?
Yeah, absolutely. As we said at the start of the show, runes are moving as well. We have quite a few movers over the last day. Dog is up 30%, Pups up 14%. There's also trading action in a few new runes like Retarded Bird Find and Psycho Hamster, who are getting actually not only nice price increases ranging from 40% to 1,700% over the last 24 hours. Those are a good amount of volumes. There's new meme coins or new runes catching some bits as well. I see you both laughing at the name. I'm quite proud of myself that I managed to go through it without laughing. And there's a thesis formulated by the bonk guy. Sorry, was saying there's literally millions of meme coins on Solana. There's 10,000s of meme coins on ETH, and there's at least 10,000s of meme coins of BNB. However, there's less than 100 meme coins in total on Bitcoin. And following that argument, there's more liquidity on Bitcoin. Again, going with a market cap comparison, Bitcoin meme coins as a whole are less than 0.2% of BTC's market cap. We had the discussion before versus a 7% figure for Solana, 13%. 7% figure for ETH, 13% for Solana. And seeing that BTC meme coin narrative is a very, very strong one. Obviously, caveating that, saying that it is hard to purchase runes. We are still trading them in bundles. But as soon as this will change, as the infrastructure will evolve and centralized exchanges will also list them, then there is a generational narrative unfolding for runes to pump. And also the bonka is saying that the upwards potential is much higher than every other chain right now. It's a discussion that in various forms we had before. My very quick thought on it would be that obviously infrastructure has to evolve. Obviously things have to get simpler, like they did on ETH, like they did on Solana. But my caveat with that is that doesn't necessarily mean that the new interest or the trading volume will go into pubs, into existing runes. And why not have that new money coming for new runes that will be created and that have like a new fresh start? Is seeing new runes being new memes being created all the time and catching new bits and pumping. And just because something is old as a meme, it doesn't mean that it necessarily will be successful unless it maintains relevance as like actual part of meme or internet culture, which I just don't see with some of the runes on BTC yet.
Okay, I think that's a super helpful breakdown on kind of sharing the thesis for runes or any meme coin on Bitcoin. Key question, we've only got a minute or two left today, maybe for Bread, because you're probably best positioned to answer this. But I think the two things I want to connect together in order to ask this question, which is pretty important, is this tweet by Jack Liu, who's the co-founder, I think, of Magic Eden. I think they did some runes spaces today or yesterday, very late in the day. They said, we are proudly the #1 runes DEX with 90% plus volume share. Runes are just the beginning. We want to support token trading across chains. We are the #1 Bitcoin DApp because we had conviction about Bitcoin system from day one when others doubted it. I think the thing I'm wondering is everyone knows the UX is so bad, but I guess are people placing a bet on the UX being better just because it's bad now? At some point in the next few months, if it's Magic Eden being the runes decks with 90% plus of the volume share, is it someone else? Is it even possible, Brad, for Bitcoin to fix that issue with runes? What's your kind of position there? Do you have an instinct, even if you don't know the technicality stuff? What's your initial thought?
Yeah, so fix is a hard word, right? Because that implies like an end state that like once you hit the switch, like everything's done. Like, will it get better progressively? I'm sure. Like, will it ever reach the point of like a Solana? No, it won't, because again, fundamentally, like Bitcoin's block times are different. You have to wait for certain things like confirmation times that take 10 minutes to whatever. Like, so like the user experience can improve relative to itself. Will it catch up and or accelerate like against Solana? I'm doubtful for again a lot of the like foundational uh, foundational reasons. And if it does, then you're probably giving up something, right? You're like so you being able to do it yourself, and you're in that way.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's completely fair enough. It's a challenge. It's obviously an uphill challenge. They're many years behind in terms of their development, but I wonder whether that's at least in part people's thinking. It's like, look, it's so bad right now. You've got the market cap stuff, which Legendary shared already, which shows that they're kind of undervalued relative to other things. Plus, you've got this. I guess the other thing that you've got space to grow is like the technical side. Like it can probably only get better from here. Whereas Solana's UX is so good already, you're not betting on more people coming to Solana because the UX is going to get better. It's already really good, which maybe is enough. But I guess you've got this gap in Bitcoin where it's like, well, you can always hope on the potential of it being better. So I wonder if that's something that people will be thinking about. But guys, appreciate the conversation. Loads of good stuff. I really enjoyed the slightly more technical stuff today. I think we want to try to do that more to kind of raise the quality of the education that we do on the show. Great conversation. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to Legendary and Bread for leading almost all of it today. Grateful for them on the show. And thank you so much for joining us. As always, thanks, Funky, for contributing with us too. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful weekend. It is Friday. We'll see you back on Monday at 7 a.m. Eastern time for 1 hour live on X, live on video, and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify too. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.